So in today's episode, we're going to talk about the Bushmaster Push Button 12, and you're probably wondering why that is an Adler. So because we don't have a Bushmaster PB12, we're going to use the closest thing we have to it, which is an Adler. And why an Adler, you may ask? Well, my pedigree chums, that's because the Adler, everything about it is semi-automatic except for the fact that it doesn't have a gas system. So before we can talk about how the Push Button 12 works, we need to understand how the Adler works. Now, as I've said, the Adler is pretty much a semi-automatic that they've taken the gas system out. So instead of the gas cocking the action, you yourself are going to cock the action by pulling the cocking handle. So let's pull that apart and have a little bit of a gander at that. Wrap our heads around how semi-automatics work, and then from there we'll talk about the Push Button 12 and why you cannot change that back to semi-automatic. Right, so those of you who own an Adler have probably pulled it apart to clean it before. Everything in the receiver up until this point here is exactly the same as a semi-automatic shotgun. The difference being is along this tube here we don't have a gas piston, and on our barrel, instead of a shroud, we just have a ring. So normally from here we would have a couple of ports. This would be extended to cup in the gas, and then the gas would come from here, impinge onto your gas piston, which would then impinge onto the action bar, throw the working parts rearwards, and then would recock the gun. Now obviously we don't have that on Adler, so you've got to use your arm and cock via the cocking handle. So let's jump into the trigger mech, because that's where the big difference lies between the Adler B220 and every other semi-automatic, and what they've done with the PB12 to make it retard the action by holding it rearwards. So let's jump into that. Alright, so what we have here is the trigger mechanism. As you can see here, here's a hammer, and we have two locking sears. So this is normally cocked, it's on this sear. Never dry fire this if you're going to do this. Take out the spring tension. When you pull the trigger, that sear is going to release, which allows our hammer to drop, then hit your firing pin, will fire off the cartridge. When you cock an Adler, even if you're fully depressing the trigger still, which 9 times out of 10 you are, it's going to lock into that secondary sear. When you release the trigger, the audible click you hear is that, re-engaging that sear, and then you fire again. If you have fired and you don't hold the trigger in and you cock, when you cock that comes back and just locks into that sear. Now what's happening inside the PB12 is it doesn't have the same sear system as this. So after you fire, it goes bang, the gun cocks, this comes back. It's kind of hard to explain without showing you exactly which sears it has. What will happen is after the bolt goes forwards, what will happen is there is no sear grabbing the hammer, and it's going to follow your bolt forwards. Now if it follows it forwards, it's not like slam fire, because if it did that then it would be automatic fire, which clearly it doesn't do. Because it follows the bolt carrier, the hammer can't actually impinge onto the firing pin, and therefore it cannot fire. When you're actually pushing the push button, it's actually allowing the sear to catch. Now I believe it's doing this by shunting the action bar rearwards slightly as you push the button, which will allow the sear to catch, the bolt will go forwards, and then you can then fire again. Now when they made the Push Button 12, it went through 7 years of R&D before the authorities in Australia would sign it off. So it's not like it's a semi-automatic with a retarder on it. It's a whole new different thing. So in a nutshell, it has a completely different trigger mech, as well as having the push button on the front of the shotgun. So let's now talk about the shotgun itself. So now that we know how the Push Button 12 works, is it worth it? I would say no. The reason being, it still is a Turkish-made shotgun. It's made pretty much in the same factory as all your favourite Turkish shotguns out there. The build quality is almost identical. What you're paying for when you're paying the 2,200 or whatever the bloody hell they're selling them for, what you're paying for is the novelty of having a push button on the front. Now, it's not the first lever release shotgun out there. Is it quick? I would say that it's not much quicker, if any, than a normal straight pull. One of my viewers who bought one of these told me some information. One of the things, he timed himself on a shot timer, and he managed to get 5 shells out in 3 seconds. Speed-wise, not really that much of an advantage. One thing I found from firing is you do have a much bigger recoil impulse, because not only are you fighting the recoil of the cartridge itself going off, but you're also fighting the recoil impulse of the whole bolt carrier reciprocating. The more reciprocating mass you have, the bigger the opposite reaction onto you is, so the bigger the recoil. It does soften the recoil to some extent. It's not as sharp as, you know, firing a normal shotgun. What it does do, it makes it a bit of a bigger push, and I found that muzzle rise was a hell of a lot more firing out of that than firing out of a normal shotgun. Now obviously you do have the added benefit of not having to take your non-master hand off, cock the gun, and go back to master hand on and fire. Now I apologise that in my video I don't actually have any footage of me firing it. When I fired this one, it was purely because I bumped into a guy at the range with one, asked if I could shoot it, shot it, took a couple of photos, but I didn't get any filming or whatever. One thing I do want to point out, now it is a gas operated weapon, so you have to service it like a gas operated weapon. On a semi-automatic, or in this case a push button 12 gauge that's using a gas system, you'll see on the side of the plastic is going to be some ducting that is actually to port off extra gas, because your handguard essentially is the outer tube for your gas cylinder. Now, in your gas system you do need to lubricate it, but please do not use oil, because what you're going to do is you're going to oil the shit out of it. When you're going to fire, it's actually going to port that oil straight out of the shotgun and into your face, which is what happened when I fired that bloke's shotgun. I got a face full of CLP, which wasn't great. Now, one thing you do have to bear in mind as well, because it is a gas operated gun, it does have rubber O-rings. This is what most semi-automatic shotguns are going to have. And now the rubber O-rings do need to be lubricated, because if they're dry, then they will crack under the extreme heat. There are different types of oils, right? For guns, there are cleaning oils, and then there are lubricating oils, and then there are multi-purpose oils. So things like Hoppe's number 9 is not a lubricant, that's a cleaner, it's a solvent, it's for taking copper out of your bore. If you were to use something like Hoppe's number 9 to clean the bore of your shotgun, what's going to happen is that's going to leak down your 2 little gas ports from your bore. That's going to go down onto your rubber O-ring. It's going to corrode your rubber O-ring. That O-ring corrodes, so you now no longer have a functioning shotgun, and you can't just pop down to Bunnings and buy this random sized O-ring to whack in there. Oils such as CLP, so cleans, lubricates, protects, which is what CLP stands for. The cleaning part in there is not good for rubber O-rings, so if you're going to use CLP, in fact, just don't use CLP. My advice to you is to use a bit of gun grease. You can buy this pretty much everywhere. A little bit of grease on your gas piston and you're good, happy days. What it's going to do, the grease will actually absorb in most of that carbon. It'll be easy to clean, keeps it lubricated, but also won't corrode your rubber O-ring. So if you do get a push button 12 or any other lever release shotgun, bear that in mind. That's my handy dandy cleaning tip. So I think that's about enough of what I can rabbit on about the Bushmaster PB12. In a quick summary, yes, it is gas operated. No, it will not work if you take off the push button. Yes, it's kind of cool. It's a bit of a gimmick. You're paying a lot of money for essentially an Adler that half cocks itself and then you've got to release it. If you're chasing speed, may not be faster per se, a little bit more ergonomic. If you shoot IPSC a lot and you shoot shotgun IPSC, then I would say that a PB12 may be what you're looking for. It's not necessarily going to make you quicker, but it may make you more accurate, which is what they're trying to do, is be quick and accurate. A lot of the people who are chasing quickness or speed in their shotguns are usually people who are blading off on a farm or whatever, and they're not really chasing accuracy because they're shooting a water can that's like 5 feet in front of them. So I hope you got something out of the video, and I apologise that I don't have the actual shotgun here, but I thought that would be a good little piece of information for you. If I do get my hands on one, I may do another video and revisit this, but if not, then I'll see you in the next video. Hooroo.